first objective, as you would know, and given that we have the challenge tomorrow, is to get the athletes back into competition. That's what they want. That's what they're craving. That's what the fans are wanting. So it's really important that we do everything we possibly can. The second element in all that is to make sure that we do it as safely and as securely as we can. And pleasingly, the world does appear to be moving away from lockdown. That's not universal, and I can't say that about all our 214 federations, but there is no doubt that we have been able to at least structure with some optimism from August onwards, middle of August onwards, a season that we hope will provide the athletes with those opportunities up until the middle of October. Diamond League is not likely to will not look like the Diamond League of last year. The meeting directors will announce the format and all the safety measures that they will need to adhere to, probably 2 months before the competition starts. There won't be, for instance, a winner this year. There won't be a points total. We don't have the Diamond League final in Zurich, but we can at least show the world that athletics is back up and running, and most importantly, to have the fans, if they're not in the stadium, at least engaging with our sport, and the athletes needing competition before they go into the winter months that face them before the Olympic Games. I think there are some other issues as well that we have been focusing on. The fund for the athletes, the welfare fund. We recognise that many of the athletes have been hit hard because of the lack of competition that has had a knock-on effect with their prize money and sometimes even maybe their contracts and bonuses. I'm delighted that Katerina Stefanidi is a member of the working group that I appointed, and she is representing the Athletes Commission on there. And you won't be surprised when I tell you she's made a very sound, very good contribution. And then I think that what we're all sort of figuring out at the moment is what are the lessons that we can take from this pandemic into the way we conduct ourselves, the way we manage our business going forward, and really how can we make the work that we're doing with the strategic plan even more effective and even more process driven, certainly with the use of some of the technology we've had. There's no question at all that in the last few weeks, technology that brings you and I together today is technology that I think can really be utilized for the benefit of sport at every level. So challenge of the next 4 years, and it's what our teams are thinking about right now, even though they're managing under difficult circumstances. 60% of the organization has been furloughed. Everybody's on full salary, and we've been able to do that because of the contribution made by the Monegasque government, and we've made up the difference. But even given the difficult circumstances by which all our teams are working, and I'm really proud of the work that they're doing, we also now have the opportunity to look at just the way that we can make ourselves a more effective, more coordinated, and certainly better connected organization. And I think whether it's in sport or business or academia or science or wherever you look, I think the smart organizations are using this opportunity just to think about things in a slightly different way. And, you know, I've always liked looking at things in a slightly different way. My whole life has been devoted to looking at things in a slightly different way. And I sense that this is a good opportunity for our sport to regroup and come out of lockdown even stronger. So that's roughly where we are. And I'm delighted that we have the Ultimate Challenge tomorrow, the second edition. And again, you know, the athletes have really driven this. A couple of weeks ago, it was Renaud and Mondo and Sam. Tomorrow, it will be Katerina, Katie, and Alicia. And I know at this very moment, our communications teams and all those teams that are helping to produce this are probably on operational calls at this moment, trying to figure out what angle the iPhone should be at and how we can have a great competition. But there was a lot of excitement. The numbers off the back of that were really impressive. We had 250,000 people watching that live. Over the next 24 hours, we had over 1 million viewers, and we had those viewers spread across 90 countries. And if you look in total at our social, our print, and our broadcast, and particularly our news reach, we were up over 100 million in aggregate, which is not a bad. It's not a bad platform for our first sortie entree in a way into this world, but we intend to do more. And I hope that in future we don't just think about these occasions as being something we had to do in lockdown. Maybe there's a way that we can, at a smaller level, engage our fans, particularly at local level. Anyway, that's sort of where we've got to at the moment.
Thank you, Seb. So, Panos, you can start with your questions.
So, firstly, let me say that it's an honor to have this opportunity, and thank you so much for it. I would like to start by asking, what do you expect in terms of numbers in this second edition of the Ultimate Garden Clash?
Well, look, I always want to be ambitious. Every time we do something, we want to be better than we were last time. It's what it's the world the athletes live in. So let's be optimistic. I think there are some things that we learned some things that we absorbed and learned from the last time. And let's say we hope we get even better numbers.
So Katerina is really confident that they can all together surpass 100 jumps. So do you think that's possible?
I do think it's possible. And who is ever going to argue against Katerina when she's made her mind up about something? She has made her mind up. So my gut instinct is she will achieve the target she set out.
Even if it is a bit more difficult than the men's bar, right?
Slightly more. But
Slightly.
I think Katerina is very smart. She will have analysed how they all jumped and the numbers that they jumped, and certainly she will have figured out at what point in that half hour with the two 15-minute segments, at what point in that half hour she will get ahead. And if she says that she thinks she can win, that's where my money would be.
What I really like about this format is that there is a collective goal apart from the win. I mean that women are aiming to surpass the men in 100 jumps. So this is a really interesting new form of competition.
Yes, it is. And look, ever since I became president of World Athletics, I have been encouraging all our federations to be imaginative, to do things that won't always work. And sometimes we'll need to go back to the drawing board and think them through again. But above all, this is the time to be brave and creative. And we've seen a lot of creativity in the last 4 years. We tend to forget that, while we've been challenged by creating safer governances and making sure we've rebuilt teams and all the things that you've been following, that we have also really focused on how do we grow the sport? How do we make our sport more exciting, more accessible, more just more understanding to our fans? And I think was something basic about that competition in the pole vault competition a couple of weeks ago. It was very clear cut, wasn't complicated. That's the beauty of athletics. The great thing about athletics is you don't need to recreate the sport. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. The sporting endeavour, the talent of our athletes speaks for itself. Just sometimes we need to be less conservative and a little bit more imaginative about how we ask what we ask our competitors to do. And actually, if you speak to the competitors, they will often give you a very good steer. It was Renault that came up with this idea. It wasn't World Athletics. It wasn't me. It was Renault. And then Renault went away and thought about the format and how they would do that. So I think I've always been a great believer. If you trust people and you give them an environment where they're not afraid to fail, you will achieve great things. And there's no question to me at all that World Athletics has led the way in everything we've done, everything we've said, everything that we've been clear about, and now particularly given that we've sort of been the first sport to get competition back up and running. It's easier for us as an individual sport. There's no question about that. It is easier. We're not having to get 22 people on a pitch. We're not supposed to be a contact sport, although I do remember 800 meters occasionally being quite a contact event. But there are lots of things that we can do in the next few weeks just to remind people that athletics is open for business, and the athletes are there, and the fans are very, very hungry for competition.
So let me ask something. I would like to touch on the eSports sector. It is a continuously growing industry, and other international sports federations have already benefited from in terms of younger audiences, motivation, stimulation. Is the esports sector in the short-term or long-term agenda of World Athletics?
Both.
Both.
We have to embrace it. And I do not sit on the side of the fence that says that they've got nothing to offer us and we've got nothing to learn from that. We have to absolutely recognize there are millions and millions of young people who are engaged in esports, including my children. And that is the world we're living in. And for us to pretend that esport doesn't exist is not sensible. It makes no commercial or makes no commercial sense, and it doesn't make a great deal of sense in understanding the landscape we're in. Every sport has to understand that. So I think there are some challenges with esport. I think in large part the content is often driven commercially. It's not driven by sport. That there will always be those that argue, well, why would we be encouraging global populations that are getting less fit every day to be spending more time on screens? But I actually think if you're smart about this, it's not what esport or we can do for esport. Everybody says, oh, well, why would you want to be helping esport? Actually, there are some things that esport have done in terms of engagement. Alexander Palace, which is a big venue in the United Kingdom, had a stop off on one of their global tours. They had kids queuing for 2.5, 3 hours to get in there, including one of my sons. So, we have to recognize that they may not be immediately applicable to everything we're doing, but I think they can be sensibly used as a recruiter. And don't tell young people that esport isn't something they're focusing on. Some of these guys are training and working 8-9 hours a day. And if you see the way motor racing has used esport, I know it's slightly different, but Nissan has an academy where some of the academy has come from people that have played esport. They're now actually driving in real time on tracks for these companies. So there are things that I think we can do to advance the understanding and the excitement about our own sport. So yes, short term and long term, we should be engaging.
Perfect. So are there any limits when it comes to technology? The future is technology, or is it a combination of technology and traditional competition format, along with new ideas in the new era, digital era?
Look, it is inevitably a synthesis of the two. We have to look at virtual and digital access points, which is really important. We know that the old days of people watching something on one screen, particularly for young people, is over. They're watching it on 2, sometimes even 3 screens. They're wanting information, they're wanting processes, they're wanting great graphics, they're wanting, when we did some initial research 4 years ago about where our sport's at, we did it amongst all our member federations, we did it amongst our stakeholders. 75% of all those groups in that stakeholder landscape said they wanted change. And the number one change they wanted to see was the way we presented our events, both on live time in the stadium and on TV and online. And of course, you are going to do that by the smart use of technology. If you look at some of the things that we did in Doha around the light shows, the mapping, the way that we were by some distance in a different league when it came to our social media, engaging the athletes. Technology allows you to take the athletes closer to the fans and the fans closer to the athletes. And it absolutely should be embraced. It can't only be a technology-driven revolution, because we have some basic principles and philosophy. But I do also think the athletes are going to have to become a little more used to, look, current batch of athletes have lived in a world where technology is second nature to them. But I think there is always that balance, isn't there, about taking the athletes closer to the fans. That does mean probably technology that's a little bit more intrusive. So you have to be careful that you're not actually damaging the potential of the athletes to compete at the very highest level. But I do think that technology will ultimately help us a great deal in just explaining to our fans just how extraordinarily talented, how interesting, how articulate that our competitors are. And it also allows you to get behind the competition. It allows you to see their lifestyles. It allows you to see the different cultures, the different geographies and boundaries that they emerge from. And that is also where young people are. Young people are very inquisitive about the world they live in, and the athletes are absolutely at the center of that.
So let me get back a bit the Ultimate Garden Clash. So Katerina Stefanidi, the Olympic champion, is one of the 3 pole vaulters participating in the 2nd edition of the Ultimate Garden Clash. She's one of the 5 elite pole vaulters, Greek pole vaulters, along with 2014 indoors world champion Philippidis. And we have 4 more world level athletes in triple, long and high jump, with recent continental medals. My point is that Greece, a small European country, has developed a tradition in jumps. Could this new reality, all these innovations, mean that smaller countries have the opportunity to step up their game with innovative and less expensive ideas in their respective specialities in order to host meetings and address an international audience?
Well, it's a great question, and it's quite a long one. I'm going to give you a short answer. Yes, it absolutely does. We need to make sure that our member federations understand that they all have a place in our landscape. They're not all going to be producing as many high quality, world-class athletes as the United States or Jamaica or Kenya, but it does mean, but the way we need to develop our sport means that there can never be a one-size-fits-all for all our member federations. Some federations are going to take more athletes to world championships than others, but that doesn't actually stop those other member federations from creating big moments for their domestic audiences, and sometimes actually surprising the world that they can do things like that. And also crucially, and there's another point here, we've also got to make sure that those member federations that don't have 30 or 40 or 50 athletes at the world championships, but maybe only 1 or 2 and maybe none at all, also feel that they have a role in our sport. And that may well be encouraging more young people to be physically active, because athletics is a really good way of doing that. And we need to respect and celebrate the type of role that they can undertake. It doesn't have to always be based on, well, how many athletes did you take to a world championship? We want to become a campaigning organization. A large part of our strategic plan is about getting the world moving. Our vision is going to be effectively about making sure that we use athletes and athletics to galvanize communities to become global communities, to become fitter. And my goodness, there's never been a better time than these traumatic days of a pandemic to know that post-pandemic, more young people will need more access to sport and activity. And if we're going to create communities where immune systems are boosted through physical activity, then athletics is better placed than any other sport to address that challenge.
Thank you. So we have seen a lot of racing competition ideas the past few months in national or international level, like the Impossible Games or in Czech Republic, for example. Do you see any of these that could be implemented in a wider scale or in a slightly different edition of the Ultimate Garden class or in the future?
Yes, again, the answer has to be yes to that. We need to be adaptive and flexible. And I encourage federations even more than I was a few years ago. If you have great ideas, not only talk to us about them, but go out and create them. And we will always support creativity. We're not suggesting that an Olympic final in pole vault takes place in people's back gardens, although it would be a darn sight cheaper. And probably cause less concern for local communities. But being serious for a moment, there are opportunities for federations to do things differently, and they're never going to be rebuked by me. I will encourage them always to do what they can to think out of the box. If they can engage their local communities by being innovative, then I will encourage them. I will always encourage them down that road. Not everything is going to work out first time, but we have always in the past, when something hasn't worked out, we've all become very conservative and right. Well, we've tried that and we won't do it again. Actually, great businesses, athletes that reach the top have many, many setbacks along the way, and they learn from those setbacks. They modify, they adjust, they navigate their way through the challenge. That's what I want federations to do, and many of them are rising to the challenge at this moment.
Okay. So today, World Athletics, you said that announced the Welfare Fund for Athletes in Need. You said that the resources must be focused on athletes who are likely to be competing at the Olympic Games. So there are some arising questions about that.
Yes.
There are a lot of athletes who haven't achieved the minimum yet, for example, in race walking. But as of right now, they're going to the Olympics through the world ranking. And in Kenya, for example, there are dozens of runners with the Olympic minimum. Are all of them eligible? And are these initiatives like the Ultimate Garden class, could they contribute to the welfare fund in any way?
All really good questions. The welfare fund, you're right, has been specifically targeted at those athletes that have been hit hard, and we know that we're not in a position to take 2,000 athletes and try and replace everything that they have lost between 2019 and 2020. We do want to understand what that deficit looks like and how much it is. But we want to focus this really primarily on those athletes that have got no other safety net at all at the moment. And what has been very encouraging is I've spent a lot of time on the phone to many federations all over the world in the last few days, and many of them are actually helping their athletes, sometimes modestly, but they're helping them survive this really difficult period. So our view was that it should be athletes that were qualified or have, by performance, have a good chance of getting to the Olympic Games. We wanted to make sure that we recognized that athletes that had earned over a certain amount of money on Diamond League or in prize money, and also those athletes that are in receipt of government or National Olympic Committee or even member federation support, subvention support, should be excluded. I wanted to be particularly tough on athletes who had had doping violations before. I don't think that would be the appropriate use of this money. So we've agreed the criteria. The working group worked really quickly and very fast. The next phase of this will be for the IAF, the foundation, the charitable arm of our sport, to then go away and start entertaining bids from the athletes, and the forms for requests for that support are now clear, and we will then do the second phase, which will probably ask for a little bit more financial detail. We do need the athletes to not only say why they're in need, but what they will use that money for. So we're now into that phase, but I thought it was good to share today with our friends in the media exactly where we got to in the last week and a half, 2 weeks.
We have another 5 minutes, Panos.
Okay. So there are a lot of athletes worldwide who are right now struggling mentally about the loss of competition opportunities. So what is your advice to them about these difficult times?
Look, they need to know that we are doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we get competitions back for them. I absolutely understand their craving for competition. I was an athlete myself. I didn't wake up in the morning just to train. I woke up in the morning to train in order to be a great competitor. So I understand that. I also know from our conversations with them that we need to be respectful of their health and their well-being, and by implication the health and well-being of their families as well, because we don't want to put them into an injurious environment where they not only got infected themselves, but they may have infected or may infect their families, parents, grandparents. That's really important. So what I would say to them is, and they don't need advice from me, because if those athletes are at the level of their sport already, they have also developed a very important characteristic, which is you bounce back. You bounce back from disappointment. And I want them to focus on getting back safely into the type of training that would allow them to compete. That's very different from what they've been doing in the last few months, which will have been effective, but really just conditioning. They need the specificity. You can do a lot in your sitting room, but you can't do stride patterns for hurdles. You can't throw a javelin. You can't high jump. So there are lots of things that they need to be getting back into competition to do. And I would also say, look, I know these are difficult times, but athletes in the past have been through difficult times. Whether it's been political, whether it's been cultural, whether it's been personal, they have got through difficult times, they have bounced back, and they have won at the very highest level. So take encouragement from the fact that, yes, it's difficult at the moment, and yes, this is probably the most difficult environment that I have witnessed in my sport, but there are plenty of athletes who have come through periods of adversity and used it to build a momentum behind their competitions when they get back into competition.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else? We're done?
We're done. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Panos. Thank you, Seb. And have a nice weekend. And let's see tomorrow what will happen in this female edition.
Exactly.